What is the most brutal comeback you've ever heard? When a hurricane was pounding his home state, Chris Brown tweeted, "Please pray for Virginia." TV writer Danny Zucker responded, "Oh God, what did you do to her?" My crazy neighbor's crazy daughters, who are identical twins, are having a massive argument. Twin 1, fuck you you ugly bitch. Twin 2, we are twins you fucking moron. Former New Zealand Prime Minister Bob Muldoon replied to the thousands of Kiwis relocating to Australia, New Zealanders who leave for Australia raise the IQ of both countries. This one happened to me. Absolutely brutal, but hilarious. I was on a job site with a co-worker named Scott, redoing some plumbing in an empty house. We had an iPad going, and a song by White Zombie comes on. I can't remember the name of it, but the intro has audio clips of a woman having an orgasm. I yelled to Scott, "Hey, I think your wife is here." He was sweeping up some dust after drilling a hole through some concrete, so he scoops it up, walks over, and very slowly pours it on the floor in front of me with a smirk on his face, and says, "Hey Pat, your mom's here." My mother had been cremated about 3 weeks before this happened. Wrecked. When I was 12ish, the mean girl in dance class watched me spill water on myself, then said, "Smooth move, X-lax," so I said thanks, Pepto-Bismol. 10 years later, and I still haven't beaten that one. Your dick's the size of a Tic Tac. Is that why your mom's breath is so fresh? Apostrophe. My dad is a pediatrician. Someone said to my brother, "Your dad touched my balls." My brother's response was, "Yeah, and you paid him for it." When Kobe said that Shaq being lazy at practice drives him crazy, and Shaq responded with, "Kobe missing practice to go to court for 8 drove me crazy." My best ever. Back in the day I was in quality control, USAF. QC with the bad guys who were always checking up on how equipment and aircraft were being repaired and maintained. We were the guys who wanted to see the technical data out, open and being followed. We wore black baseball caps with white QC letters on them. One evening I wandered into the avionics building around the midnight shift change time. There I was spotted by a technical sergeant, who did not like me much. He was surrounded by 3 young female troops and apparently couldn't resist showing off for them and fucking with me. He said loudly, "Look out. It's QC, the queer chaser." I quickly replied, "That's right, Sergeant Boyle. I'll give you 5 minutes head start." The girls all burst out laughing, and the sergeant turned red and never bothered me again. Which one of us is a city council member? Apparently the wrong one. Me, 11 years old, debating a CC member during an election campaign. A few years ago, Misspaced Tom was defending Instagram when someone tweeted, "Says the guys that was not able to keep a social network alive." Misspaced Tom responded, "Says the guy who sold Misspace in 2005 for $580 million, while you slave away hoping for a half day off. One of the greatest internet burns of all time." Lady Astor, "If I was your wife, sir, I would poison your tea." Winston Churchill, "If I was your husband, I would drink it." My HS principal once insulted my mother's English. She's not from America. She just politely apologized for the mix-up and said, "I'm sorry, sometimes I get English mixed up with the other 6 languages. How many do you speak?" Someone tweeted at Ken Jennings, Jeopardy star, that he was reusing jokes on Twitter. He replied, "The only joke I've done twice is your mom." Man on bench, run. Forest, run. Jogger, sit. Fat ass, sit. I had a customer angry we couldn't take another company's gift card. He said, "Are you saying I can't read?" I said, "No, our store got sold, we can't take those anymore. The grace period ended 2 years ago." When he looked at the gift card again he said nothing. His wife said, "I guess you can't read after all." I wanted to high five that lady. Watch your mouth, young man. Watch your weight, middle-aged woman. I was on Sparks Live, and some older girl was trash talking these young kids who were admittedly 9, 10, and 12. She said something crude, and another guy pipes in and tells her to get a life. She exclaims, "I have a life. This is my boyfriend's game. I'm just on my lunch break." The youngest sounding of the kids with no hesitation or pause says to her, "I didn't know hookers were even allowed to have breaks." Lady in line at Starbucks, could you please compare and contrast the 5 following roasts of coffee bean and tell me whether each would be best with pound cake, lemon squares, or pecan pie? Cashier does his best. Woman, I'm sorry. Could you repeat that? I don't speak gay. Cashier, no problem. I'm fluent in bitch. My friend and his sister were arguing. Sister, none of your friends even like you. Friend, you're so unliked that even your baby knew. She had a miscarriage a few months earlier. Armenian guy told a Russian guy Russians are retarded. Guy answered, well, what's worst, being retarded or invaded by retards? When I was 13, some older and heavier girls were picking on me in dance class. I remember one of them saying, bite me, in front of all her shitty friends. I replied with, I'm trying to cut fat from my diet. Shut that cow and her friends up real fast. Gow Whitlam, former Prime Minister of Australia. When Sir Winton Turnbull, who represented a large rural seat, a slow and sometimes stumbling speaker, was raving and ranting on the adjournment and shouted, I'm a country member. I interjected, I remember. Sir Winton could not understand why, for the first time in all the years he had been speaking in the House, there was instant and loud applause from both sides. For anyone who doesn't get it, I'm a country member, I'm a cunt, remember. Cow Walker shouts across the floor that there's a woman on the phone. She says she's pregnant and she thinks the baby might be mine. Tell your mom to stop calling me at work. Guy getting frustrated that girl doesn't want to go home with him. Guy angrily, why don't you sit on my face? Girl, why is your nose bigger than your dick? I used to play in a band, Turkish, Arabic, Greek, etc. music. There were about 8 of us, pretty much each of a different ethnic background. These guys were all in their 60s and up, and would always jokingly pick on each other, and had super dry sense of humors and dad jokes. One time the Greek guy said, you know, the Greeks invented sex. Then this other guy said, yes, but then the Italians taught it to women. I was playing COD 4 on Xbox with some friends some years ago. One of my friends said to some guys we just beat, why does your breath smell like my cock? Some guy says back, because I just ate out your sister without skipping a fucking beat. XBL used to be a brutal, cruel world. Not mine. Heard this one right here on Reddit a year or so ago. It was an actual occurrence. Student is walking down his school hall not realizing his flies down. Some guy spots it and says something along the lines of fishing for queers. Student replies, looks like I caught one. Sorry, I wish I knew who posted that one. I thought it was devastatingly hilarious and want to use it myself one day. When I was in school, I told a girl her mum was a prostitute. She stabbed me in the eye with a metal file. That was a good one. So you're Amish? It must suck not being on the internet. It's not so bad. I just get pics of your mom in the mail. Not the most brutal, but my favorite happened at a MLB game. Drunk teens heckling an outfielder. Hey, I fucked your wife. Stupid stuff. After 30 annoying minutes of this, guy in front of me yells down, hey kid, I remember my first beer too. They shut up and slunk out soon after. I overheard this in the cafeteria in 8th grade. Is it cool if I sit here? No. This table is for the 2-foot dicks club. That's fine. I can cut off a few inches. 8th grade me was very impressed, so much that I remember it 15 years later. When I was at work one day, I was a cashier and overheard a man yelling at the service desk about another one of our employees, spouting off about how we were terrible and how our workplace hires idiots. My supervisor looked him dead in the eye and asked if he wanted an application. I see a girl in a bar and some man walks up to her and says, I bet the first thing you do in the morning is walk back home. She says, not from your house, asshole. Really late to the party, but buddy of mine is at a Blue Jays vs Yankees game, sitting down the third line and yelling at Jetta, you suck. You're a bum. Jetta turns around, glances and says, yeah, I really wish I had your life. A classic Jim Ross one-liner from WWF/WWE Attitude Era, Shane McMahon. I'd like to buy him for what he's worth and sell him for what he thinks he's worth. My buddy used to get in bar fights in his early 20s. Whenever somebody started yelling insults at him and getting aggressive, he would calmly let them finish their verbal rampage. Then, as everyone waited to see how he would respond, he would smirk a little and sarcastically say, nice haircut. Something about that drove the other person mad. Always ended in a fight. I was in the marching band in high school, and we took a school bus to the away football games. We spent the trips there and back goofing around, being general high school band kids. One guy thought he was pretty good at freestyling. He wasn't, and would often ask someone to make a beat for him. One day, someone gave in to his pleas and started tapping out a beat. He started up, '06 is the year that we graduate. I'm about to go ask Kelly on a date. From the seat behind him, this super quiet guy jumps in, but she'll probably say no, so you'll just masturbate. Chorus of Uodamu was heard all through the bus. It was the greatest. Freestyle guy never asked for a beat again. Raymond's mom from Everybody Loves Raymond to Ray's dad. You treat me like I'm your trophy wife. Ray's dad. What contest in hell did I win? Cop here. Called because a teenager was talking back to his parents. Not hitting, not throwing things, not hurting anyone. He was just being a spoiled cunt. Parents had given him anything he wanted all his life. Mom got mad at me when I told her this was not a police matter, it was a parenting issue. She started going off on me. I said, I can't fix in a 15-minute call what took you 15 years to fuck up. The complaint was worth it. I was in college at a bar, and a guy had been relentlessly flirting with me all night, trying to get me to have sex with him. Finally I came up with a line I was sure would get him off my case. Sorry, I only bang virgins with 9 inches. My friends hooted and high-fived me, and I tossed my hair and sat down, feeling like the queen of zingers. That's when he stood up, shaking his head, and said sorry. I don't fold my dick in half for anyone. He walked away, and left my friends and I sitting in silence. I still have a scar from that burn. When my younger brother was about 13, I noticed he had come home from school with a bit of a black eye and I asked him how he'd gotten it. He wouldn't tell me what had happened. I thought he seemed a bit ashamed when I asked him about it, so I assumed he'd lost a fight, and I left it alone. A few weeks later I heard what had happened from one of his friends who witnessed the event. There was a kid who went to school with my brother who he'd known since he'd started primary school at about 5 to 6 years old. Let's call him Joe. Now Joe was a bit of a jerk. His father had died at a young age. I suspect this was why Joe was always quick to fly off the handle and had a hard time fitting in. He had a reputation for winding people up and generally being a pain in the ass when he was around. Our father had just bought himself a new MGF sports car, which has a bit of a feminine look to it, and Joe had decided to choose this as his ammo for having a laugh at my brother's expense on the bus ride home. Joe said, "Hey, does your dad cut hair for a living? He's driving a hairdresser's car, didn't you know?" My brother allegedly replied with, "What does your dad drive? A coffin?" When I asked my brother about why he lost the fight, he could have easily taken Joe. He told me he was so ashamed immediately after he said it that he just took the pummeling out of guilt. Still, A+ for a quick comeback.